It feels like we're all sitting on a power keg, with one side lighting matches and the other pretending it won't explode. This is the global game being played right now with NATO and Russia squaring off over missile strikes, and China is quietly gaining ground in the background. Let's talk about this. So I want to take a quick minute to share some thoughts. Lots of things happening in the world as we draw towards the end of this month of September. October is going to be an interesting setup for a variety of reasons. But one thing I haven't really talked much about happens to be the events unfolding out in the Eastern Hemisphere with this whole proxy war between Ukraine and Russia. And so Zelensky was in the U.S. this past week, making his steps throughout the country, basically begging for more currency. And the U.S. has continuously pledged full support no matter what. And because of that support, it's good to say that the war is going to really be drawn into a much bigger global conflict pretty soon. One thing is not being talked about that I think I want to touch on happens to be the potential risk of a nuclear event, because you have all these nuclear powers, whether it's Israel right now or you have Russia, both in a state of high alert, if not already in confrontations or emergencies. It's just a matter of time before something really trips off some type of alarm or some type of false flag event, unfortunately. But in this video here, I just want to share some thoughts in reference to just a potential red line that is being crossed right now for humanity's sake when it comes to nuclear powers all being under pressure right now. And that's something that we are not really considering as hopefully something that will never ever play out. But then again, it could be used as a last ace up a sleeve for the globalists that are trying to remain in control over this dollar-centric paradigm that we live in now. And so at this current moment, you never know what might come next. But I want to share some thoughts, get your take on it as well. So if you guys are interested in more of these short takes, definitely hit that thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe and then take these videos, share them with others so people can get an alternative perspective on what's going on here. Because I make these to hopefully keep you informed, one step ahead of the masses so that you'll be able to navigate these waters a lot easier, especially when it comes to your finances and being able to protect and preserve everything you work hard for. But let's start off with talking about the nuclear red line, basically playing chicken with Armageddon. So the first major issue is nuclear war, a terrifying but real possibility. See, the West is flirting with the idea of approving missile strikes deep within Russian territory, and that's pushing Putin to the brink. So imagine this like a dangerous game of chicken in a winding road. One car representing NATO is edging closer and closer to Russia's car, hoping that the other driver will swerve around him. But instead of swerving, Putin's laying down a red line. Basically, if you cross this line, we're going to respond with nukes. It is not just an idle threat either. Putin has clarified Russia's nuclear doctrine, stating that even conventional missile strikes from the West could be seen as a direct attack on Russia, which would warrant a nuclear response. And so that's the kicker here. Washington insiders like John Bolton and all those warmongering people are calling Putin's bluff. There's no evidence that Russia is preparing a nuclear arsenal. But is that the risk worth taking? So if the West keep pushing, we might just find out how far Putin is willing to go. And the second issue of concern happens to be the sanctions that are boomeranging right now. And so let's shift gear for a quick second here on this economic front, where the West thought that they had Russia cornered. So the sanctions were supposed to cripple the Russian economy, but by cutting off their oil revenue and blocking imports of critical goods like semiconductors, think of it as trying to choke off an oxygen supply to the Russian economy. But instead of them gasping for air, Russia's finding a new way to breathe, and its name is China. And so the West plan all along was to economically try to stranglehold Russia, which has clearly not worked out because their economy is doing a lot better than what we're being told. So instead of being isolated, Russia has pivoted east, with China stepping in to fill the gap. And so Chinese exports to Russia have skyrocketed, basically tripling since the sanctions began. Meanwhile, the Russian defense budget is ballooning, gearing up for what looks like a long war. They're going to try to hold this thing out for as long as they can. So basically, with no signs of a financial collapse the West was hoping for. So the situation is a bit like trying to dam a river, only to realize it's flowing in a different direction entirely. And another thing is worth thinking about, China's power play. Who are the real winners here? So while Russia and NATO are locked into a high-stakes game, China is sitting in the background playing its cards brilliantly. The sanctions meant to hurt Russia has inadvertently strengthened China's hand. Beijing has not only become Russia's top trading partner, but also positioned itself as the real power behind the scenes. So basically think of China as a quiet player at a poker table. They have a winning hand while others bicker and raise their stakes. So China's economy is on the rise again, largely thanks to stimulus efforts and cheap loans within their country. So they've cut interest rates to try to boost spending, and they're flooding their domestic markets with liquidity. So essentially pumping currency into the economy to keep it moving forward. And here's where it gets interesting. Australia, a top supplier of iron ore and liquefied natural gas to China, now is sweating bullets. And the reason is because Russia, massive gas reserves, is now supplying China with cheaper natural gas. basically undercutting Australia and shifting trade relations in Moscow's favor. So this dynamic is Australia a lucrative lemonade stand on the corner until Russia opens up a stand just down the street selling the same lemonade at half the price. So no surprise, China is turning to Russia for more energy needs, and Australia is left scrambling, trying to offer China something that they can actually compete with. And so at the end of the day, the bigger picture of what I really want to get to is that the West appears to be running out of moves, and that's why things can get dirty. What's becoming clear is that the West strategy isn't working as planned. So the war in Ukraine is dragging on, and clearly there's no chance that Ukraine stands a chance at any win. And Russia isn't collapsing under economic pressure the way that the West wanted them to. But so in fact, the West might be running out of moves. And so their economies aren't primed for long-term conflict either. See, debt is skyrocketing, manufacturing is struggling, and support for Ukraine is starting to wane down a little bit. So there's only so much longer the G7 nations can keep funding this war before the currency runs dry. And that day may come sooner than a lot of people expect. So on top of all that, the Western Hemisphere's over-reliance on sanctions has driven Russia and China a lot closer, creating a geopolitical shift that will be hard to reverse. And of course, we got the BRICS meeting coming up in a couple of weeks. So the global economy is changing with China and Russia working hand in hand while the West keeps doubling down on a losing strategy. So the bottom line is, what we're witnessing is a massive geopolitical shift, and the West is not winning. So the nuclear threat is looming, and that's why it can be real concerning in the days ahead, because at some point, you can only get down so much before you decide to play dirty. And China's playing the long game, positioning itself as the ultimate winner in this conflict as things winds down. So as the West continues to push its agenda, it's important to ask yourself, are we walking into a trap of our own making? That's what it boils down to. So once again, the red line is being crossed on the nuclear front. China having domestic financial problems within their own country, deciding to cut the spigot on the fun things. You have the Western nations more desperate now to try to keep all these conflicts within their own control. So between the Israel event, the China-Taiwan situation, and the Ukraine and Russia situation, there's a very high probability that the West, in particular the U.S., is stretched thin right now. And we have a presidential election coming up in a couple of weeks. So that's a lot of things to be trying to juggle all at once. And so once again, it's just something worth keeping an eye on, man, because at some point, if the West feels that they're trying to manage too much, they may play dirty. There'd be an event that we can't turn away from or turn back to. So once again, just taking a minute, sharing some thoughts on this whole geopolitical confrontation the world is facing right now, and just praying that it doesn't go nuclear, because if it does, there's no winners in a nuclear fight. But anyway, your guys' thoughts on this. If you found value here, once again, hit that thumbs up button. Give me a comment down below so I know what your thoughts on, as well as what you're keeping your eyes on as well. And other than that, look forward to bringing another news update real soon. Enjoy your day.